All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Thank the person who sent you here. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, as per usual, as promised, here we go again. Somebody who's been put on this earth to do nothing but help you develop professionally, personally, the whole nine. Having Miss Jacqueline Wagner, founder of Wagner HR. And for those you guys know all about me, I have a sports background, and that's what kind of got me interested in teamwork and working with organizations and businesses and things like that. And when I saw HR, and she has like a law background, Jacqueline, I was like, oh man, I can't, like, to the point where I'll just be 100% honest with you guys. There were certain things I didn't even want to say until we started recording because I want to make sure I'm gonna be like a sponge, just kind of picking up on a lot of the things she learned, and it's gonna be just an incredible time. So, all that being said, Jacqueline, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Aswan.
All right, so let's start from the beginning because, like you, I've had some struggles in school when it comes to be outside of me being the football player. I was never fit in. I was never the guy that had a ton of friends or anything like that. And you actually kind of expressed some of those same things growing up when it comes to the work you do. And, we're going to get into the emotional intelligence and some of the neurodivergent work that you kind of talk about now, but I kind of want to just give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about your upbringing, how school was for you. And then it wasn't until later on in life that you actually found out you had ADHD. So it's like, please fill us in on how people can miss that, especially me being an educator now, how that could be missed throughout your whole years and all that kind of stuff. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
So I see you heard my podcast from yesterday, so I'm really glad about that.
Listen, man, this is the number one show. I do my research. I don't mess around when it comes to this stuff, man. I do what I gotta do.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So as you said, I wasn't diagnosed until after I failed out of my first year of law school. So I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And the reason I hadn't been diagnosed, although I knew I was struggling in school, is that my brother he has dyslexia and pretty severely, and so he wasn't even able to read by fourth grade. He was still learning to read and not reading to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother was really dedicating her attention academically to him. She only has the two hands, and so she had to focus on him. I
Now,
seem to be
was
doing
this an older brother or a younger brother?
this younger brother. This is
Yeah,
my
so
younger
I
brother.
know that because I have an older sister too, and there's always, and by the way, that happens on the show sometimes when you start hitting some triggers. But I was the younger brother, and the older sisters, there's always this protective feeling there because as women, again, they're nurturing by kind of nature, but to have your younger brother, there's always going to be that love and wanting to protect them, and then you have one that has a severe disability. So it's like, okay, you got to do what's best for your younger brother. So just wanted to put that shout out to you. Love you very much, Sissy. Love the big
I
sisters
think
out there.
I think it was that women, mothers tend to be a little harder on their daughters than they are on their
I
sons.
1000% agree with that too. I'm sure she
Yeah,
agree with
and
that as well.
so my mom could see that I was handling myself just fine. I mean,
Yeah,
I was getting by academically.
yeah.
And so she kind of left me be. She would help me with my homework, but not like she did with my brother. She really
Mhm.
hyper focused with my brother. And I struggled, but I really hit my wall when I went to my first I got my degree. I got in political science, and I went to law school, and then I really hit a wall. I failed out of my first year of law school because I just was not able to digest the information quickly enough. The first year of law school is like drinking out of a fire hose.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all this information coming at you.
Mhm.
And I just didn't have mechanisms in place yet in my life that I could navigate that really complicated
Mhm.
first year of law school. So I failed out. I went and got tested. I got tested, and they told me, look, you're pretty severely impacted by ADHD,
Mm.
and we're not sure you're going to be able to get a college degree. they didn't know I already had
You
a
already
college
have the college
degree.
degree though. Yeah, that's what I said. You already have the degree.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I got really upset with
Yeah,
the tester, and I said, I'm really glad I didn't come to you before I had my degree, because you would
right.
have dissuaded me from getting my education. And I'm really glad that it's at this point in my life that I'm getting tested, because I wouldn't have wanted that messaging. I would have absorbed it.
Yeah.
And my mother's messaging was different. My mother's messaging was, go for it, don't stop, you're going to college no matter what. And so yeah, it wasn't until I failed out of law school, and then after I got diagnosed, I picked myself up and dusted myself off and went back, and I finished third in my class. So
Walk us through that moment though, because I know that, listen, school, we have our differences. We've said a lot of different things about school, but the concept of school, grade school in particular, there's no denying that you need that security or that understanding of learning basic things through the grade school system. It's a secure thing, and I recommend all kids do it. Now, college, on the other hand, I'm always the one that making sure and telling people know what you want to do, figure out what it is you want to do before you spend the money on tuition. But at this point, you've already gone through the entire system, and then you get a jolt like that where you're realizing that you actually have a serious condition. What did it do for your trust issues in the school system? How did it make it so you were able to process that and then ultimately do what you said, and then graduate third in your class, and then ultimately create your own HR firm? Kind of walk the listeners through that, especially the ones that may be struggling with a disability and they found out, before they get the degree, and they're starting to say, what, school ain't for me and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, yeah. So I suppose I feel a little differently. I do think college is for everyone,
mhm.
but it's not going to be the same experience for everyone.
Yeah.
You can get a degree in art, you can get a degree in mechanics, you can get a degree, right? But I think education for education's sake is really important. So that has to be your first priority if you really want to get that degree.
And even to that point too, there's also, it doesn't have to be a big fancy university. I tell people all the time, my mother got an
No.
associate's 2 years, and is one of the smartest people I know, runs her own house.
Yes.
Just that education, doing
Yes.
something. But there's so many different options, guys. And I went to a Catholic high school that they want to send their guys all to these big time universities. So I felt like a failure if I didn't go to Stony Brook University. That's where I went to go. But as I'm looking back on it, I realize, wait, community college, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong
Yeah, no.
with right here and things like that. And sometimes kids kind of get that message wrong. So
I agree with that. And so education for education's sake has to be the first priority. And then the second thing for someone who's struggling is your drive and determination has to outweigh your messaging that you're getting to dissuade you from keep going.
mhm,
And if you're able to have the mental capacity, the mindset, the strength of mind to cast out the naysayers,
mhm,
cast out the messaging you're receiving, and the messaging could be in your own head.
mhm,
If you allow yourself to have that drive and ambition outweigh all of the naysayers, including yourself, you will be successful. You will be able to move forward.
mhm. Okay,
You
so
will be able to move swiftly.
they're the moving swiftly. Appreciate the plug. Appreciate the plug. It's part of the. I love that you brought that up, because the way when you finally get that degree, does a job offer come right away? How do you go from there to now I'm gonna start my own HR firm? And what are some of the steps that you took in order to get your own practice going?
Okay.
Mm.
So, no, the job offers did not come right away. Not at all.
Right.
You have to hit the pavement. Finding a job is a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I was really, really lucky that I got to intern in the summers with a corporation.
Mhm.
And then I leveraged that to sort of work there until I found something permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to work for a litigation firm, and I almost right away, that took me like a year to find the right fit. And I didn't like litigation, not at all. But I
Mm-hmm.
kept doing it. I kept learning. I kept growing. Then I worked for another litigation firm. And then I got to a point in my career where I was pretty good at litigation. I was pretty darn good at it. And I
Right.
was doing litigation and advice and counsel and training
Mm-hmm.
equally.
Mm-hmm.
And um, deciding once I had 25 years under my belt of practicing law, I decided, I think I want to go do my own thing. I think I want to create my own career out of whole cloth instead of having my career created for me, right? And so now I get
25
to,
years of the litigation, the stuff that you really weren't feeling, that you really weren't liking initially, or was it
well,
other?
I dare say I never liked it, right? I just never really enjoyed the adversarial nature of litigation, although it is necessary when things go south, when an employer gets sued.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm more interested in preventing employment lawsuits
Mm-hmm.
with, my top five are good employee handbooks, good solid training, cultivating emotional intelligence in leadership and line employees to make sure that employees have psychological safety in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
um, having conflict resolution programs,
Right.
and robust DEI programs that ensure that psychological safety for everyone
Yeah.
in the workplace.
Okay, so I want to make sure I make the point too for the listeners is you sometimes when you're on your journey, you got to do what you have to do to eventually land on the things that you want to do. It's going through
Yes,
certain things that makes it so like I love how succinct you were able to just spit it out. You didn't need no notes. You knew exactly what you wanted. And we're gonna touch on the cultivating emotional intelligence in a second, but you were able to know exactly what you want because you've been through doing something that, again, you had to do it, but you learned something from it. So many of you guys would
yes.
Steve Jobs and, all right, I don't want to do this. Just go do it. Just go do it. Figure it out on the way. Jump out the plane and then build the wings on the way down. So, all of that being said,
That's right.
yeah,
I was had I not experienced the litigation, I wouldn't know what to do to protect against litigation, right? I wouldn't have the appropriate background to be
Mhm.
able to say, look, I know how employers get themselves into these messes. Let's prevent that from happening in the first place.
Yes, man, that's awesome. So, all right, so one of the things that you do speak very passionately about is cultivating emotional intelligence, and I do want to give you the platform to give your full description on how you are able to cultivate it and what made it so you have such a passion for it. Like I could even feel your passion about talking about emotional just through some of the previous just looking through your website and some of the previous shows you've been on.
Right. So I believe that the best way to go about preventing employment lawsuits is cultivating what's known as emotional intelligence in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And emotional intelligence is a coin of phrase used by many psychologists in the past, but really popularized by a workplace psychologist named Daniel Goleman. And he wrote a book in the 1990s called Emotional Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And he argued that emotional intelligence versus intellect, our way to process information, and substantive knowledge, emotional intelligence outweighs those two factors in career success. And if you have intellect and substantive knowledge, but you don't have emotional intelligence, you won't be successful in your career.
Mm-hmm.
And he posits there are five factors of emotional intelligence. And the two most important ones go hand in glove. The first is self-awareness, being aware of what makes you tick and what your triggers are and who you are and how you present to the world. On the other side of the same coin is the factor of empathy, how you relate to other people and how you have compassion for their experience, even if it's not your own lived experience, your ability to be empathetic toward other people. That's very important in the workplace. Third is your ability to self-regulate. Are you a person who gets upset very easily? Are you a person who feels overwhelmed very easily? Or are you able to regulate your own emotions so that you're an effective communicator and you remain calm and clear-headed and you're able to handle the task at hand? The next is motivation. What is your level of drive? And this goes back to what I said earlier about your motivation, your drive and determination have to outweigh any of that self-talk or the naysayers that you're hearing about not being able to succeed. And then the fifth component is your, your social deafness, how you're able to interact with others, how you're able to pick up on communication from another person, nonverbal communication, how you're being perceived in the room, and how you're able to negotiate that and pick up on that. And those 5 factors, well cultivated, are going to make you way more successful in the workplace than just your substantive knowledge and your intellect.
Now, how do you go about teaching that? Because I've had a lot of different jobs. I've bounced around. I've been in fitness, athletics, currently in education, and these are very transient in just industries. And the people in the, even though whether it's fitness, we're teaching and we're motivating people to work out, that's the clients. But I've seen so many of staffs, they don't say good morning. They're not like one of my pet peeves personally is when people don't say good morning in the workplace. It just drives me fucking crazy. And I have to self-regulate to realize, okay, maybe some people aren't like that, but it still absolutely pisses me off when you don't see people saying good morning to you in the morning. So when it comes to teaching that and kind of breaking the fact that people are there to get their job, get their check and move on and really don't care much about their staff, what is the way you're able to gauge your clients when it comes to that? Because I know from personal experience how difficult of a task that is.
So the first part of our workshops is we have everybody take a self-assessment. And we usually ask folks to do that before we ever really sit down in the workshop. They should come prepared with their own self-assessment of where their weaknesses are and where their strengths are. And then we go component by component and we teach, I teach how to cultivate each of those skills. So we teach social deafness, social skills in the same way we would teach a neurodivergent person to cultivate their social skills. And if someone is really weak in that area, well, then they may have to put artificial mechanisms in place just so they have those social niceties. So the person you're talking about may just be a gruff person. It may have nothing to do with you. But look at how much disharmony they are cultivating in the workplace by not saying hello and not smiling, right? So I would take that person and I would say, this is the impact you're having. And here's why that's important, because you can't necessarily tell someone, here's the impact you're having and expect them to have empathy. Oh gosh, I feel bad that I'm having that impact, because they might not care.
It'll be fake. Like if you were to go directly to this person and say, start saying good morning to this person every single morning, and then he or she starts doing that, I would know that it's fake. It's because some consultant told you to do it. So the question is like, how do you make it so they are empathetically saying good morning and they actually are doing it from a good place? Because you could be doing more harm than good if you just tell the person, oh, do this one thing, you start doing it. Now, what am I, stupid? I know you're just doing it because some consultant told you to do it. Let's get deeper and tell me, or let's show them why it's important to do that
Yes.
activity. So
to explain the why.
Mhm.
Most people want their career to go well, right?
Yeah.
And if you explain, you are causing toxicity and disharmony in the workplace, and that's going to hold you back in the long run.
Mhm.
They listen. They're like,
Okay.
oh, I don't like that,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And then we call on them to be self-reflective.
Mhm.
Like, okay, how can I improve? And you're walking through with the employee themselves so that they're coming up with it themselves. How could I be more present? How could I be more empathic? How could I be, how could I have higher social skills? You
Mhm.
know, and you're walking through with them, but relating back to, you know, the disharmony that they don't want to be creating because it impacts their own career. Of
Right.
course, you're going to get people saying, well, I don't care, you know, but they
Exactly.
do. They care. They care.
Yeah.
They want to do well.
Right. And that's where again I really want to pick your brain in terms of how you're able to get them to see it as something that is important to care about. Because being 100% honest, you're gonna go into the job, or even with you, you've done things because look, the money was good. I'm getting my check, I'm paying my bills and stuff like that. And if somebody gets fired or if there's a person that leaves, at least I still have my job. So there could be a new person that comes in. How do you get them to kind of see? And Grant Cardone talks about this a lot. He goes, you know, selfish or poor people, middle class people only think about their own check or their own money. They're selfish. They're not thinking about how is everybody else going to eat. So how do you break them from that habit and just look a little bit, just spend a little time, understand that people are going through certain things. Everyone ain't trying to eat, and really actually say, I'm going to do what I have to do to not only grow my career, but we're going to bring everybody up. So the workplace is just ticking and ticking and ticking. And this is where I like, you want to be moving swiftly. You want an organization that's just on point. Everybody knows each other. We're arguing, but it's arguing in a healthy way. We're agreeing, we're doing things, we're having breakthroughs and all that kind of stuff. I know that was a loaded question, but you give me, this kind of stuff gets me excited.
That's great. Okay.
Right.
I'm very creative with how I approach what's going on
Mhm.
in a workplace. So my first thing I do is I sit down with leadership and I say, all right, why am I here? Why did you bring me in? Because 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, it's because something happened, right?
Yeah.
Something happened. So that's my focus
Okay.
about what happened. So then when I find out what happened, I am charged with the task of figuring out how to meet the gap in knowledge
Mhm.
with information. It's always a gap in knowledge. Let
Mhm.
me give you an example of something I did with one client.
Please, yeah.
So the gap in not the problem was that they were having an inordinate amount of sexual harassment claims. This was following the Me Too movement, and they were getting claim after claim after claim for sexual harassment.
Mhm.
And, you know, they were like, we need this robust policy that prohibits. I said, no, what
Hmm.
your problem is an emotional intelligence problem. You have a workforce who is unaware, no self-awareness, and
Mhm.
unempathic. Okay.
Hmm.
They didn't believe me. I said, okay, let's do our homework.
Mhm.
So I asked, who am I going to be working with? Who are our worst offenders?
Mhm.
And they told me who the worst offenders were. They happened to be men who were making comments or physically acting toward women
Hmm.
in a way that was making the women uncomfortable.
Right.
But the women weren't saying, stop it, I don't like that, knock it off, you're making me uncomfortable. They
Mhm.
were just silent.
They were just doing their job. They were afraid to lose their job by saying something.
This,
Uh,
or they were just silent.
right.
So I said, okay, that's a lack of awareness. That's a lack of awareness. Remember, I said awareness and empathy are
Yeah.
different sides of the same coin.
Right.
So I went in and I asked a few questions about the gap in knowledge. And I found out that most of the men who were the offenders were under the misunderstanding that if the woman didn't say stop, no, knock it off, leave me alone, I'm uncomfortable, that
Right.
it was okay.
Yeah.
And I taught them that the standard for whether sexual harassment is actually sexual harassment is whether it's welcome, not whether it's consented to. Consented to is putting up with it and not saying anything.
Wow.
But welcomeness is, hey, come here. I want a back rub. Can you rub my shoulders?
Right.
Right? So guys are coming up behind the secretary at her desk and rubbing her shoulders, and she's not saying anything. So he's like, oh, I guess we're good. No,
Right.
that's consent.
That,
She was not welcoming it by saying, come here, I want a back rub. Or gosh, my shoulders are so stiff, right? That would be soliciting it, welcoming it. And so teaching just that one thing,
yeah.
that sexual harassment isn't analyzed through a lens of consent. It's analyzed through a lens of welcomeness. So to put it plainly, unless the target is welcoming it,
Yeah.
soliciting it, asking for it, it's harassment.
Yeah.
That clicked. And we were able to reduce sexual harassment at that organization, well, sexual harassment claims at that organization after that training by 33% in 1 year. That's an amazing result and return on investment.
Yeah, you actually just helped me with a lot of things because you're right. That welcoming versus the consensual, I'm a trainer and fitness and all that. Again, these are even clients, members. The gym I was at is no longer in business, but this owner would, get ladies who would complain at how creepy he used to be and things like that because they're working out, they're sweating, and the understanding was if it's not welcoming, like one of the things that they would tell me is if it's not welcoming, then they feel very uncomfortable with it, and that's what would made them cancel their membership. So
Right.
eventually they'll cancel their membership and move on. But this guy, I don't think he was doing that on purpose. So you don't know these things when you're
Right. He was not self-aware.
self-aware, right?
He lacked empathy. He didn't understand. Empathy doesn't mean, oh, I feel really bad for you. That happened to you.
Right.
It means being aware of how the other person is feeling.
Yeah.
And so to get kind of the green light that conduct is welcome, you have to check in with the other person. You have to know how the other person's feeling.
Right.
With consent, it's a really low bar, right? They just have to not say no.
Right.
And so, and I'm talking about sexual harassment.
Right. Yeah.
And so just to make the employees aware,
Yeah.
this is what is going on. And we got questions and questions and questions. And so you're saying that unless she's soliciting my compliment about her hair, or unless she's asking me how she looks today, or unless she's asked me to rub her shoulders, I'm not allowed to do that. Right. That's right. Okay. Because I thought if she didn't say no, if she wasn't shirking me off of her, then it was okay. No, that's not what the standard is. So it was just a gap in knowledge. It was a gap in emotional intelligence.
Right. And a lot of this too, and this is definitely important for you listeners to understand, a lot of it is communication. You've got to be very well at your ability to communicate and communicate very delicately, because there was actually speaking of that, Jim, there was another member who came in who I think she was like on her third marriage or something like that. But she was very transparent, very open about, previous relationships and stuff like that. And I remember she wrote a review about me that I didn't even know I was doing with myself. She goes, I love the trainer's friendly disposition. And I'm like, I never even heard the term friendly disposition, but when I thought about it, is because again, I knew myself. Again, I've been in locker rooms and I had conversations where she's kind of opened the door to say, "This is what I went through with my previous relationship," and then I'm asking her, but I'm not asking her too personal questions. And the development. At the time, I was going to Toastmasters a lot and developing as a public speaker and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is, like you said, making sure you are really gauging the situation, hearing people out, and don't overstep, but don't be a robot. Don't be the person that's only, oh, I'm only going to do this, but really get to know what's motivating a person to come into that work establishment every single day. And it boils down to empathy. So, that leads me to one of the next things I want to talk to you about is who would you say is an ideal client for you, an ideal leader for you? Because I'll be 100% honest with you, that there's some leaders that really don't give a damn. They have their money, they have their business, and to hell with their employees. That's obviously not the people you're looking to work with. Who would you say is somebody that, you would definitely welcome working with if they're listening in and they want to, kind of improve the morale in their office and things of that nature?
Well, thank you so much for that
Yeah.
question. So the decision to kind of take the reins of your workplace as a leader has to come from the top down, right? So I love working with very motivated business owners. That's the CEO, the C-suite folk.
Mm-hmm.
They bring me in, and then I'm able to work with them, and then the top down.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I'm training the leadership to, develop and cultivate the emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And we see huge returns on investment when we do that. And I'm looking for somebody who really does believe already that this is going to be a great return on investment. An employer who understands that the employees are the greatest asset. And the better you treat your employees, the more profitable your business.
Yes.
I'm not in the business of convincing an employer that that's important. That's a job for, a workplace psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I have the tools to help the employer get there, but being open-minded at least to that conversation is detrimental. It's imperative to being able to work with the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have the trust of the C-suite folk,
Right.
of that business owner,
Mm-hmm.
then the rest of the leadership it's much easier to get them to comply and agree and go along with the program. But if I don't have buy-in from the top of the food chain, it's not going to go well, because the top person or persons, they're the ones that set the culture and climate for the rest of the place.
Yeah, and just so you business owners listening in, when you do make the decision to pay for this kind of stuff, you develop loyal employees. Right now, you can go to makeitmove.com and I have a free ebook that says how to create loyal employees. All right. And when you pay for personal development, when you again go take money out of your budget and bring someone in, these employees will be loyal to the soil for you. I'm telling you from personal experience. I've seen it done. I'm a football guy. I know what it's like when a coach goes to bat for you and they say, hey, we'll do it. Even if you're messing up, you make a mistake, we're not giving up on you. When you do this for your staff, what it does for that staff's family, when it comes to whatever they may be going through in the home, you pay for this, they will be loyal. And it's so important that you do these things, because eventually as the owner, your responsibility is to make money. You have to make sure the revenue's coming in. You're not going to get a chance to have the relationships with your employers that an employer is going to have with another employee. I mean, an employee is going to have with another employee. You're the employer, so you can get to know them, but you got to be the one making the decisions on if they're going to be hired or fired. So there's always going to be a level of discomfort, so to speak, in terms of what they say. But when you pay for folks like whether it's myself or even Jacqueline to come in, they will care so much about you. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So, with all that being, good, you're going to say something.
And then that folds into reducing your employment litigation.
Yeah, and that saves money.
So
It's a ton of money. Yeah, that's what I'm
it
saying.
saves a ton
It
of
yeah,
money.
it's
So,
a whole circle, right?
right. When there isn't emotional intelligence within the leadership, and they're especially lacking empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and the employees don't feel psychologically safe at work,
Mm,
if there's a performance issue from the employee and they're getting disciplined or they're getting written up or they're whatever,
yep.
in the absence of emotional intelligence and leadership, the employee is left with no choice but to perceive that the reason they're getting written up, the reason they're in trouble, the reason they're having these performance issues is because they are blank,
Mm-hmm.
gay, a woman, a
Mm-hmm.
person of color.
There's
Uh,
nepotism, right?
Pardon me?
Some nepotism too sometimes, like just
Nepotism,
yeah.
sure. They're left with no choice but to believe and perceive that that's why.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing a good job of cultivating the emotional intelligence in your leadership and they're communicating well with the employee about where there are opportunities for growth and performance,
Mm-hmm.
the employee is not going to be left with the implication that, they need to sue, and
Yeah.
they're not going to sue. And
Right.
to your point, a loyal employee doesn't sue, right? Because they
Right.
feel like they belong, they're included, they have psychological safety, and they feel valued and heard. And so they're not going to sue.
Right. And actually that actually makes me think of another point I want to make is you can't do this on your own. Business owner, manager, you cannot do this. I see it over and over again. I'll even give you an example, Jacqueline. I still teach at this school named the Center for Creative Education, and the principal is another lady. She's a Caribbean lady, and she's kind of gotten, in my opinion, has gotten too close to the other teachers, or some of the other teachers, obviously not me, but we tried to have a meeting the other day, and a whole hour nothing got done. It was just nothing but a bunch of jokes and nothing but a bunch of hypotheticals. This could happen, to the point where it was me and maybe like one or two other teachers like, are you serious right now, for a whole hour? And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, it's because she's gotten so close and become so friendly with some of the other staff members that you guys can't even have a serious meeting, to the point where you as a business owner, you're going to need this for yourself to make it so, hey, I know I'm exercising, I have authority. I'm not being, I'm not doing my job if I don't let my employees know from time to time, hey, I'm the boss. I'm going to love you. I'm going to trust. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you. But at the end of the day, you got to be the decision maker. You don't get to be the employee's friends. I cannot tell you how many times I've said that on this show. As a boss, as an owner, as a manager, can't be their friends. It's not going to work. The business will not work. Either you're going to get fired or the business is going to get shut down. That's just the way it's going to work. You
Yeah,
cannot be
and,
their
and
friends.
you're given a fiduciary responsibility when you're in leadership,
You are.
to lead. And so that doesn't always align with trying to be the friend. But just because you're not their friend doesn't mean you can't lead well, right? Doesn't mean that you can't be very inspirational and motivational. And if you are, you're going to get the very best product out of your employees.
Yeah, I think that word motivation is incredibly important, because we got to be 100% honest. If you don't love what you do, you're not going to be motivated to do it. Steve Jobs has said it so many. I mean, you got to love the process of doing it every single day. You got to love it just as much as the people in the entire building. Set the tone, man. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff when it comes to just a football background and how they showed up to work every day. And these guys weren't getting paid. This is not a paid gig, but they showed up every single day, loving what they did, and it rubbed off on us as players to go out and want to play for them. And that's stuff that just has stuck with me throughout my entire working life. So, man, I'm incredibly excited to have this conversation with you. I do want to make sure I actually know can you tell people what's next? Your PR for the HR firm, everything you got going on. Just tell people how they can get in touch with you and what is coming down the pipeline.
Oh, thank you so much. So we offer all aspects of human resources consulting, pre-litigation, employee handbooks, investigations, conflict resolution, all that stuff. And we also offer these workshops on emotional intelligence for your leadership, where they can assess their emotional intelligence, see where their gaps in knowledge are, and we can fix them. We can help fix them. And you'll see a return on investment. And then the way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is wagnerhr.com. And Wagner is WAGNER, wagnerhr.com.
Excellent, excellent. That'll also be included in the show notes as well. So, Jacqueline, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You just failed out of law school. You just got the diagnosis. I want you to pretend that that version of Jacqueline has come into the Zoom room. She's here. Give her some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
You can do this. Get yourself up, and dust yourself off. You got this. You're very smart. You'll find a way. You got this.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Listen, the mic is officially dropping on that one. You can do this. Get it off and let's roll, man. Pleasure talking to you, man. I'm looking forward to staying in touch with and keeping up with your journey. It's gonna be fantastic. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.